colleagues, panelists, and distinguished guests. On behalf of the South African Presidency, let me begin by thanking the African Development Bank for co-hosting this timely and essential dialogue. We are honored to welcome you to this G20 side event on advancing effective strategies to mobilize financing through country platforms. I would like to thank the panelists who have kindly agreed to share their experiences on country platforms. As we meet today, global financial pressures are intensifying. Rising debt levels, tightening liquidity, and the climate crisis are converging to undermine development progress, especially across the African continent. At the same time, the financing gap for sustainable development continues to widen. We had a very robust discussion on these issues yesterday in our discussion on the African expert panel. There's general consensus that we need to address these issues, and as the G20 presidency, we are committed to work with our partners to make progress on these issues during our presidencies. Country-owned and country-led platforms emerge as a powerful vehicle to address the scale and complexity of these challenges by enabling alignment to policy reform. Under the theme Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability, South Africa's G20 presidency has prioritized country platforms in the 2025 International Financial Architecture Working Group work plan. This includes identifying best practices, enhancing coordination, and building capacity to scale up their use across emerging and developing economies, and hopefully in more African countries too. Today's side event forms part of the broader effort as highlighted in the G20 Multilateral Development Bank roadmap endorsed by leaders and ministers last year. Scaling up effective country platforms, particularly those that mobilize private capital at scale, is crucial to addressing development and climate priorities. We are fortunate to be joined today by experts and practitioners who are not only designing but also delivering these platforms. One of them is our moderator, Mr. Neil Cole, and who also serves on the implementation team for South Africa's Just Energy Transition Partnership. South Africa's Just Energy Transition Partnership is a concrete example of a country platform in action. It brings together government, international partners, development finance institutions, and private investors around a single nationally owned investment plan anchored in South Africa's broader energy and fiscal strategy. The JETP amplifies how domestic policy reform, credible planning, and strategic international partnerships can unlock financing at scale. Let me close by saying that country platforms are not only technical instruments, but also the expressions of national ownership and collective ambition. If well structured and fully supported, they can become the foundation of a more responsive and resilient international financial architecture. Thank you, and I look forward to discussion ahead. I now give over to Neil Cole. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marlon. And good morning, everyone. And let me also welcome you to this important panel discussion with the topic of good country experiences in building and operationalizing country platforms. Let me apologize for the somewhat late start. This is as a result of the previous panel overstaying their welcome. So I'm going to try to be as efficient as possible so that we can get through our program and also provide you with an opportunity to engage with our panelists. This panel is convened as part of a broader effort by the South African G20 presidency, as Marlon mentioned, and the African Development Bank to elevate African leadership in development financing and to accelerate the shift from fragmented project-based aid towards integrated and country-owned platforms. The topic is an extremely timely one, and this is because we are at a moment when both the global financial system and the African development landscape are being reshaped. Reshaped by climate challenges, fiscal constraints, and the need to crowd in private investment at scale. Country platforms offer us a practical, sovereign-led solution. They bring together governments, development partners, and the private sector into a single coordinated vehicle that aligns finance, policy reform, and delivery capacity around national priorities. Let me take an opportunity to speak very briefly about the South African experience in setting up the JET country platform. We launched our JET country platform as a response to the urgent need to decarbonize our economy while maintaining energy security and ensuring social inclusion, especially for workers and communities that were dependent on coal and the coal value chain. Our motivation was to embed climate finance into national development planning, not as an external add-on, but as a central driver of economic transformation. Our platform is anchored in the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, a government-approved roadmap that aligns public policy, donor engagement, concessional finance, and private capital mobilization. And was an investment plan that we got approved towards the end of 2022 and did a launch at COP28. What we've learned is that success depends on three things. Firstly, strong leadership, strong domestic leadership, and institutional coherence. Our platform currently is housed in the presidency, the South African presidency, and works across all sectors. And just to say, institutional coherence is complex, and it takes a great deal of effort in ensuring that that is achieved, but it's critical that that is attained. The second is building trust and alignment through early engagement with social partners, local governments, and the private sector. We are fortunate in that we have a Presidential Climate Commission that acts as an advisory body and also set up to represent the different sectors in society and undertake that consultation. So when we got the JET investment plan approved, the Presidential Climate Commission was responsible for that engagement with different sectors within society. The third is innovative financing tools, including blended finance windows and policy-based loans that are linked to systemic reforms. I was part of a panel yesterday that IDEV had convened, and it was looking at how evaluative evidence can contribute towards capital mobilization. And I made the point that, the challenge is not just about capital mobilization, but it's also about aligning that capital to national priorities as a dual challenge. And for that, innovative financing tools are going to be important. In South Africa, we face challenges too, particularly in securing timely and predictable flows of concessional finance, building investment pipelines, and maintaining transparency and accountability. But the platform that we have has already begun to crowd in long-term finance and shape more inclusive national dialogue. So let me now turn to the panel. So today's panel brings together experts from Kenya, from Germany, the IADB, and Africa 50. Experts with diverse and rich experiences in setting up, implementing, and supporting country platforms. We're going to explore a set of key questions in this panel. The first is, what motivated countries to set up country platforms? How have these platforms aligned policies, regulations, and development partner engagement? What have been the experiences in engaging the private sector and building trust? Fourth, what innovations or lessons have emerged that could benefit others? And fifth, what types of incentives and guarantees have proven to be effective in unlocking climate-aligned investment? So I certainly look forward to learning from each of the panelists as they unpack the opportunities, innovations, and institutional arrangements. So let's start with, from my far left, with Dr. Yusuf Hussain. Dr. Yusuf Hussain is the Climate Finance Advisor in the Office of the Special Envoy for Climate Change under the Executive Office of the President of Kenya. So Yusuf, maybe to start us off, if you can provide us an overview of how you have aligned domestic policies, regulatory frameworks, and development partner engagements to build an enabling environment for your platform. And as part of the learning process, maybe also share some of the challenges in setting that up. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Nils. And let me first appreciate the South African government and the G20 presidency and the African Development Bank for convening us here today. I also want to appreciate the fellow panelists for turning up to this important session. That said, I want to give a little bit of a background on what and why I think we need to roll out country platform across our beautiful continent. The compounding effect of debt, sovereign debt in Africa, to the aid cut that is really impacting the continent in a big way, and three, the unfairness of the global financial architect systems that we've been championing the last several years as a continent. So that compounds us into forming a vehicle, a country-owned, country-led vehicle that can mobilize resources both at private and public level. Here in Kenya also, we are basically designing, we have sectorial plans now, but we're basically designing a vehicle that is able to carry everybody together. We are considering our key domestic frameworks like the climate action plans, the NDCs that were just submitted the other day, the NAPs, and all the other strategic documents, including what we are calling bottom-up economic transformation agenda for the current administration, into a vehicle that can bring them together and carry the ambitions of mobilizing resources for the green potential we've been harnessing the last few years. We are fortunate enough that we put together green pipeline projects, but what we're still missing is the financing. And what Africa, I think, in general, is also missing is the financing. So, yes, Africa has potential to help decarbonize the world, to feed its population. But how long do we have this potential the runway is also very short. If we don't take off today, then tomorrow maybe someone else will be very innovative, as Neil was saying, that they are going to uh, uh, manufacture synthetic minerals, for example. So the potential we have is what we want to harness, and how do we do that is why we want a country platform. We are institutionally, we want to anchor this platform, learning from our brothers in South Africa at the presidency also, so that it has that coordination wing. And also at the office of the special envoy where I come from, with all the relevant ministries and departments forming the technical working groups. And that brings now what we are saying, the approach of carrying everyone in the country together. Importantly also, I think we are thinking about having it structured with partners like FDB, the World Bank, IMF, EBI, and all the other bilateral and multilateral partners in the space, including the philanthropists, private capital ventures, so that we carry everybody along and design a stakeholder that is fit to mobilize resources at the scale that we need. If I may highlight the challenges, we may not have one because we don't have a structured country platform, but what I foresee is, as a key challenge, is balancing the speed, balancing speed and inclusivity as a key challenge. So what do I mean by that is, in as much as we're saying we have a strong political momentum, building a broad-based ownership across government ministries, county levels, the private sector, development partners may take time to, and a structured coordination. So that is what we have learned from our brothers in Africa, that we really need to coordinate and pass beyond this challenge of coordination. So we bring everybody into one house and see how we can move with that. Another challenge I foresee is, and we want to keyword is, we want also to create a high-level steering committee that will sit at the highest level where this is going to be domiciled, so that we have a vertical and horizontal coordination of activities. Beyond that, we also happy to learn from the bottlenecks faced by our brothers in Africa, in South Africa, in Senegal, in Egypt, and beyond Africa, in Indonesia and other countries that have really implemented country platforms, so that we have we can learn the challenges they faced and how they overcome and structure ours in a better way. So what we have is just a designing of a country platform right now, not actual platform, but the intentions of having to mobilize resources that we need at the scale that we have ambitions is what we want to kiwa. Thank you, Nias.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. So I think it's going to be important that that this peer exchange that we're having, not only here but also when we do engage with other African countries that have established jets, that we learn from that exchange, and also let that exchange contribute towards a peer alliance as well. And one of the lessons that we've certainly take out of the development of our investment plan and its implementation is that, as you say, that runway is very short, and as that jet takes off, that jet is not completely built yet, and we're actually building that jet in the sky. And I think that requires a great deal of understanding, especially from our partners and the various stakeholders that we're working with. So thank you very much for that. Let me now turn to Christopher Ra, who is the Africa Director at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Welcome to the panel. So if we can maybe just get a mic, yeah. So if you could, share with us Germany's support for country-led platforms in Africa, And how are your instruments or operations tailored for local ownership? And how are you aligning that support with the support that is being provided by other MDBs and DFIs? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Let me start by saying that thanks to the G20 presidency to put such an issue prominently into the agenda of the presidency. And I'm saying that because what we are discussing today has to do with effectiveness of our cooperation. And in terms of shrinking space, financial space, I think it's even more important to talk about the question, how do we work together? And I think country platforms definitely are one way of delivering better, not only from the view of donors, but also from the view of partners, of course. And of course, I would also say it's not a totally new issue. Some elder colleagues like me may still remember the discussions that we had on the poverty reduction strategy papers and some 20 years ago, which was, of course, a gigantic project of a country platform because it brought together all actors to implement a development strategy of the country. But looking back to that, and that's maybe also a lesson learned that I would like to bring in, it did not work. And why didn't it work? Because the ownership of the partner country was not big enough. And that's for me, when we rediscuss it now, and many things we are discussing today are also written down in the Paris Agreement on aid effectiveness, which is also a bit forgotten nowadays. But the main issue was that ownership is very central. Whatever we do, whatever we from the donor perspective do, has to do with ownership. If it's not there, our interventions are not successful. But even looking at ownership, it's of course a broad expression, and one could ask, what exactly is it? Ownership, in my view, has also to do a lot with leadership. That's, for me, therefore, a very central aspect, that whatever we do as development partners, it must be under the strong lead of the partner country. And Neil, as you explained how it works in South Africa, I would say, yes, there is a strong lead from your side. And therefore, I'm very optimistic that this new model, ChatP South Africa, will be a success story. I'm personally a bit more involved in the Senegal case. I think the colleague is not here today, but I would say we are not yet so advanced as you are in South Africa. But of course, it's also an opportunity to learn from each other and to see what are the preconditions for success in one ChatP or the other. Looking to the German development cooperation, what I can say, even now having a new minister since 2 weeks, but I would say it's granted that she will continue to build on strong ownership by partner countries, and our approach in the bilateral cooperations is to fully align with the strategy of our partner countries. But bilaterally, I would say it's quite easy. When we come together as a group of actors, it's getting more complicated. Looking maybe a bit to the experience that I have in Senegal, and with Senegal, where France and Germany is in the lead on the side of the donor group, I think the most important thing in the beginning is to clarify expectations. What do we want from each other? To have a clear framework of understanding how who has which interests, so to say, in this format. A second aspect, which was already mentioned, it must be fully transparent. The communication must be open, and then we also come, of course, very rapidly to the question: how can we bring together our processes from individual structures, from individual institutions, like bilaterals, multilaterals, so so to say the due diligence process to build on preparation work that was done by others than we, for example. To give you an example, the World Bank and our development bank KfW negotiated a MOU on mutual reliance and co-financing. I think that's always a certain preconditions for actors to work together in a good way, but it sounds maybe easy, but it's a very complicated thing sometimes. And I think also between the World Bank and the African development, that's ongoing work. And I would encourage the MDBs to continue in this spirit, to also to build on this mutual reliance process and make co-financing easier, to bring it in together in these country platforms. Maybe I'll stop here, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just to pick up on your point about the importance of the partnership, I think that is very true. With South Africa's JET investment plan, for that we have what we call the International Partnership Group. So it's a group now of 7 countries. And when the US pulled out of the JET-Ps, and in particular out of South Africa's JET-P, we could, because it was our plan, we pursued the plan. It didn't derail the plan, but the important support from our other partners also helped to keep us on track. I mean, it's added a complexity, but it certainly made dealing with that complexity a lot easier. So thank you very much for that. Let me now turn to the next panelist, and that is Mr. Avinash Prasad. Avinash is the Special Advisor on Climate Change to the President of the Inter-American Development Bank. So Avinash, maybe if you can share with us some of the risk-sharing tools that's in place in the IADB, or financial instruments that have been most effective in mobilizing private capital into country platforms. And maybe just linked to that is, from your experience, what has been the most scalable components of a successful platform, and what would be required to replicate them across more countries? Thank you.
That's a lot. Thank you, Neil. Thank you to the South African G20 presidency. Thank you to the African Development Bank. I should begin by saying that when I first came across country platforms, I didn't like them. I didn't believe in them. I was representing the finance ministry of a developing country, and in the climate negotiations, a negotiator for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I thought of them as part of that donor deceit, conceit, I should say, not deceit, conceit, that the problem was not a lack of finance, the problem was a lack of organization in developing countries. And I have come to change my mind on country platforms, and I've come to realize that they don't solve the lack of finance. They don't create that conduit we need from where capital is plentiful and cheap to our countries where it is expensive and scarce. But it provides a very important landing spot for that capital. And without that landing spot, it's going to be difficult. So it is key to improving the impact of the capital flow and improving the impact of the capital that is already there and available, whether that's from the multilateral development banks, the domestic financial institutions, development banks, the DFIs, and others. And I think there are two fundamental reasons why, two fundamental problems the country platform has to solve, and I will end with some comments on the Brazilian country platform and our instrument there that we think is mobilizing international capital into Brazil's renewable energy. It's called the Eco-Invest project, renewable energy and sustainable agriculture. I began my career as a commercial banker, and I thought this was a commercial banking problem, but then I became an MDB, a multilateral development banker, and I realized it's a banker problem, which is that bankers are product-focused. They're not customer-focused. It's odd, but it's true. We like to go to our customers and countries with a fancy, new, shiny, complicated, complex new product and say, look, you need this. And the more sophisticated and complicated it was, the more it made us look clever, the more we would be pushing these products. And it wasn't driven to what the customer's problem was. And indeed, as development banks, we compete with each other, although we don't say so. And so it would encourage another development bank to come along and say, no, that product, well, we've got a better one. And so the point, I think, of country platform is it really needs to be nested in country ownership. This is the country's plan. This is how you, the development bank, the DFI, fits in to the country plan. And I think that's very critical. It's not to say complete convergence. These different development institutions have different roles to play. But it is about coordination to maximize our impact, avoidance of duplication, and the correct focus. The other key advantage is that, let's be honest, we in our countries do have difficulties in coordination. Our ministries do not speak to each other. And that's not a function of being a developing country. Christopher, my dear friend from Germany, we often hear from my German friends that, oh, we can't do that because that's a different ministry. Ministries everywhere in the world don't speak to each other. And so you could say you find in a country that you've got an incentive from one ministry, a penalty and a tax from another, a regulator saying something else. You need to have coherency. That was a word that Niels mentioned at the beginning. So the country platform is not only country ownership, it is bringing on a platform coherency across the different ministries and regulatory bodies. And these are the two critical issues. And let me end with the Eco-Invest platform, country platform in Brazil, where we have one platform for climate and nature positive projects, where on that platform are all the regulatory incentives and penalties for things that don't fit in with the Eco-Invest priority, which is a country-led priority. And we found that a major stumbling block was the currency mismatch. It was actually mentioned in the last panel. Renewable energies in particular are paid for, unlike fossil fuels, are paid for by local consumers who pay in their local currency. And if you required foreign investment, you have a currency mismatch. And the cost of hedging that currency mismatch is huge, 10 percentage points per year. And that makes viable commercial projects unviable after they've hedged the foreign exchange. So we found that for long-term renewable energy projects, say 25-year power purchase agreements, 90% of the FX risk is actually an inflation risk. So on the platform, we have projects that a regulator has approved to be inflation indexed. And then we, as a multilateral development bank, offer the ability to match the real exchange rate mismatch. We would offer contingent liquidity whenever the real exchange rate fell very sharply, but also we'd offer to customers a real exchange rate hedge. And that's 1/10 of the cost of a nominal exchange rate hedge. And so we found that's a way of galvanizing international capital into a country-led set of projects and country orientation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. input. Let me now move immediately to Mr. Alan Ebubisi. Alan is the CEO of Africa 50 Group, and I'm just going to make the assumption that everybody knows Africa 50 Group.
I'm not
You
sure,
have
but
you have 34 shareholders.
I do.
31 are African countries. So I believe my assumption is going to be the correct one. Ellen, maybe share with us how your institution supports country-led platforms in Africa, and how are your instruments or operations tailored to local ownership?
Thank you, Neil, and thank you again to the G20 and to the African Development Bank for inviting me to this very important conversation. So Africa 50, I think many people know us, but for those who don't know us, we are indeed owned by 33 African countries, the African Development Bank and 2 African Central Bank, plus PIC of South Africa, which is one of our shareholders. And our job is to help catalyze private investment in infrastructure in Africa. And it's important to understand the mandate, because for us, in order to mobilize more private capital into Africa infrastructure, country platforms are quite essential, because first of all, for a private sector deal to move and move fast, you need to have strong country ownership. Of course, you can always do those deals without the strong country ownership, but then it takes a long time. It's difficult negotiation. You can sense it when the country doesn't own the project, things don't move, things are not smooth. So the country ownership is extremely, extremely important to enable us to achieve those projects, to implement those projects with speed, and I would argue at scale. There's also, on the point that Avinash mentioned, and all the panelists touched on it, the internal in-country coordination is so important in order to make the process, the implementation process, efficient. As a private sector, an institution with a private sector mandate, I should say, because I almost said I'm a private sector institution, but I'm owned by government. But an institution working with the private sector to catalyze private investment, we see that where countries have a clear plan and ownership of bringing private capital, we are able to invest in projects and catalyze more investment. In South Africa, you have some examples. I mean, the Renewable IPP program, it was not then yet a country platform. I don't know that we were calling it that way. But you saw the example of bringing a significant amount of private capital when the government decided to have a program and designed it and called on the private sector to participate. So we have to look at those examples. There's another example, which is the Bemban solar project in program in Egypt, over 1.2 gigawatts of solar power. Africa 50 is an investor. We have invested in 400 megawatts of solar. It's a very successful program where countries have taken ownership, leadership in designing the program and working with the private sector. Now, one of the tools that is quite important, in my opinion, to facilitate this work at the country platform level is to significantly increase the amount of project preparation and project development resources allocated to preparing projects, to making sure that even when countries are willing to have this vision and plans, they have the resources that they can deploy to prepare the project. We at Africa 50, we have a project development fund, and we're also very pleased that a number of countries and institutions have supported the African Development Bank, Africa 50, and the African Union Commission to launch the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. I'm very pleased that BMZ is supporting us at the Asia, which is quite important, because preparing project, developing a pipeline of bankable project, working with countries to have that, to make sure that it's a supply of good project is key in attracting private capital in countries. So this is important. And again, country platforms will make it easier for us. Don't get me wrong. we're still going to do project with or without country platform. We will do it more efficiently and with more scale when we have a coordinated approach in the country, and especially if we have leadership in country to make sure that we have a counterpart that enable us to do this project. So Africa 50, we are very supportive of country platforms. We're supportive of making sure there's a lot more resources allocated to the early stage work. There's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines that will come into project if we have enough bankable project. Sometimes not enough folks are focusing on the early stage work. Everybody is waiting for the project to be prepared. Somebody has to do it. So the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa is a really good tool that can support country platforms. And here at Africa 50, we want to do it at speed with scale. So the country platforms are our friends because we want speed and scale, and country platforms can help us do that.
Thank you very much. I think the point coming across from all the panelists is that, I mean, country platforms shouldn't just be another name that we're throwing into the development nomenclature, right? That what country platforms offer us is an approach to dealing with the complexity of transitioning, right? So where countries are undertaking a transition like South Africa from what is a largely coal and a carbon-based economy to a renewable energy and green economy, the complexity of that transition is best tackled at the moment through these country platforms. But as you say, Alan, I mean, if you're just investing in a renewable energy, solar, or in a solar plant where you are taking care of your energy security, it doesn't necessarily require a country platform. So we're putting these country platforms in place for very specific reasons, and one of them being able to take all these stakeholders along with us. Let me now open up to the audience for any questions to any of the panelists, but maybe before we do that, let me ask you to give the panelists a round of applause. Thank you. And the one person I know in the audience whose hand has gone up is Gareth.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the panelists for their interventions. So my name is Gareth Phillips. I manage climate and environmental finance at the African Development Bank. So, I mean, we've heard that the country platforms are a key tool for broader development financing. They're also very prominent in the climate change discussions, and the Brazilian presidency for COP30 is calling for actions to implement country platforms. Within the MDB Climate Action Group, we've been talking about country platforms for, I think, as much as 3 years, possibly more. I would like to ask the panelists what would be their recommendations to actually move to implementation. What are the key steps that we need to take to go from talking about country platforms to actually have something that we could talk about as soon as COP30 in Brazil in November? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe let's take another question. And in the meantime, let me ask Yusuf to start thinking about the response to this question. There's someone at the back.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. My name is Pietro Tuigo. I'm a country manager for Angola and Sao Tome Principe for the African Development Bank. The African continent is in a slightly odd situation in which there is really a dominant DFI that, and it's not us, unfortunately, that outguns us 1 to 10 in terms of financial resources. And our experience on the ground, it becomes very difficult to try and bring together a very, very, very large elephant to try and play around with smaller animals. I'm thinking of the elephant because it's there on the screen. With very little other animals, when that elephant can actually is big enough to go alone. So how is the challenge? And I'm specifically thinking of those in the panel who represent our shareholders and shareholders of other multilateral development bank. How do we create incentive for really everybody to play together in a country platform? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So, Avinash, I'm going to prime you to be the first to respond to the question, because I'm sure your regional development bank also has to deal with the elephant. Is there a third question? Please. Can we get the mic to, can you just keep your hand up?
Thanks again for this opportunity. I'm Kamal from Bloomberg. My question goes to Africa 50. We would like to know, what's the next big infrastructure project you are working on, or can you give us more detail on that? Because we are craving for more, for some information regarding that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So let me turn to the panel for responses. And Christoph, you can come in at any point. Yusuf, starting with you.
Thank you, Neil, and thanks to the audience and the questions. I want to start with question 2. As an African country, we've been making a lot of noise on the lack of financing, and especially financing for African-based projects due to the perceived risk. So I want to urge my brother that we don't care where the money comes from. You can consolidate, whether big or small, as long as it's available at the convenient rate. Africa is ready. Projects are ready in Africa. What we need help is to remove the perception of the riskiness associated with African-based projects. So I will leave the rest to Avinash. I'm sure the big elephant is going to handle the rest. And to Gareth, my good friend, I mentioned earlier on that we can present the first country's early mover country platform by COP30. And how do we do it? Kenya has an intention to form one now, so we really need a lot of support, technical support. We are looking towards the MDBs, towards the African Development Bank, and of course the discussion we've been having behind the curtain with you. We feel like we really need to organize this group of stakeholders to actualize the intention that few countries have already came forward with in forming a country platform to mobilize resources for the huge potential they have internally. So from where I sit, I think there's a lot of goodwill, as you mentioned. Brazil, with the COP30 presidency, offering a lot of support to country platform. South Africa, with the G20 presidency, offering support to country platform. There are a lot of window of opportunities that we can, if we leverage, we can have an early mover country platforms launched in COP30 in Belém. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Avinash?
So let me answer the first 2 questions together, because I think they're quite strongly related. So IDB Invest, the private sector arm of the Inter-American Development Bank, takes over the chair of the climate heads of MDBs in June, July. And so we count on the African Development Bank to help us to have an ambitious push for the MDBs on country platforms, on climate resilience within country platforms, and so we count on you for that. I think it's very interesting to me that country platforms today are very much supply-driven, not demand-driven. We don't see countries baying for country platforms. We see the development institutions saying we should have them. And so we need to worry about that. And I think it's partly because when I was in a developing country, developing a country platform, it was like, okay, you're going to send some of your most important, experienced people away for months to develop a platform when there's no money. And they come up with a platform and it says that we need 300% of GDP, because from a developed country perspective, they often don't appreciate that their country platform may require 25% of GDP to be country resilient. But for developing countries, it's a huge number. It's unfinanceable. We have to make sure these country platforms have investment priorities. But somehow we need to link it to the potential of additional finance, because that is the way to get some demand, country-driven demand. Maybe to Alain's point, it's new additional money for project preparation facilities to help projects get onto the country platform. Maybe, but it has to be something in which a country can see that there's a definite payoff from investing the time and taking our critical people away. There's a finance payoff from doing so.
Thank you very much. Alain, your latest.
Yeah, there was a question for me, and my friend from Bloomberg is always, they want to have the scoop. But then if I say that, everybody would know. Look, I think we are always on the lookout and actively working on major projects with major impact. I'll tell you, one of the things that excite me the most are two things. We are actively involved in launching a big transmission public-private partnership program in Africa. We will be doing the first one in Kenya, and my brother from Kenya is here. We've been working on it for some time. We are close to finalizing the agreement. And many countries on this continent now know that transmission constraints have been extremely, there'll be big constraints for transition in Africa. A lot of people have invested in generation. We still need to do it, but we need to do a lot more in transmission, and there is no reason why only the public sector is financing transmission. So after Kenya, look out for a number of countries and look out for a massive transmission program that Africa 50, working with the African Development Bank and others, would be doing. And also, since you asked me one, I can give you two. We are also very excited about a major initiative, actually an investment program, which we are doing with MTN, which is to connect the eastern shores of Africa to the western shores of Africa with fiber optics. You know, in Africa, we have a lot of cables landing on our shores. There are very few cables going across Africa, and we need to change that, and we're going to do that with MTN, of course, always with the support of the African Development Bank Group, because, of course, African Development Bank created Africa 50, and my chairman, President Adesina, is guiding us. So these are two things that I can provide for you, but I can tell you there are more we're working on. So there is a scoop? Well, there's more.
They say that they cannot be transition without transmission. Yeah, Christophe, if you want to come in on.
Maybe just a small comment to the big elephant question, that's of course a relevant question, I think, and I've seen it in my own experience. Sometimes I remember when I asked a friend of mine, World Bank, big elephant in a country, why don't you work together with the small animals? And his answer was, when I do that, my working day stops at 9 and not at 7. So it's an additional burden for the big elephants to work with the small ones. And I think we in our institutions have to think about that. What can be incentives? You're totally right, pointing to that. But I think the main push must come from the partner. The partner country must ask us as development partners that we have to work together. And instead of individually talking and discussing issues in the context of climate or whatsoever with the ministers, to ask us to talk to them as a group. And that's, I think, the key of the whole discussion.
Exactly. I mean, I want to add to country platforms this other term that we also use, and that is co-creation. Because your country platforms are typically not where the mandate lies. I mean, they are government departments that have the mandate for the policy development and implementation. And what country platforms can do is to co-create those implementation plans that Gareth referred to, because it's where the various components are pulled together, right? I mean, the legislation, policy, the financing, the procurement, and also very importantly, the capability to implement. So let me see if there's, but I do want to want to do a quick time check. Do we still have some time? 10 minutes maybe? 10 more minutes, okay. Let me see if there's any other pressing questions from the audience. None? Okay. Someone at the back. Okay. That will be the last question.
Okay. Is it speaking? Right. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Okay. So my question is for the CEO of African 50. Is it talking? Okay. My question is for the CEO of Africa 50. So I wanted to know how does Africa 50 see itself in really shaping the influence of country platforms across the continent? Are you really involved only in financing or affecting policy? Okay, are you mainly involved in financing projects across the continent or affecting policy as far as capital mobilization and building country platforms is involved? How does Africa 50 play a role in this? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. Of course, the essence of the country platform is to work in partnership. We work closely with the African Development Bank, and they intervene a bit more early stage than us in terms of the policy framework. But we have project development, project preparation tools that we would deploy to support the country platform. And the other thing that we would also propose is that we have investment teams that we like to work on. For example, we strongly believe that a transmission program across the continent anchored in country platforms is something that we will love to help support with our expertise, our project development capabilities, and there's a lot of investors that will come in. So there are these kind of themes that we can also help promote. And other organizations, other MDBs, other DFIs are more excited about other themes. But at the end of the day, it's the country that actually defines first what they want and what they take ownership. We can suggest things, but it comes from government. My sense is that this independent power transmission, we will hear a lot about it very soon, and Africa 50 wants to work very hard to make it happen.
Thank you very much. So the showers of blessing is encouraging us to conclude. So let me just once more thank the panelists for their insights. And maybe just as a concluding comment, I think this was really wonderful peer exchange that we've had. I think we've all really learnt from each other. What's going to make country platforms work is the opportunities that the bank can potentially facilitate, and that's the opportunities for peer alliance. Yeah? So we have another 4 minutes, and I'm going to now invite the African Development Bank representative to come forward and provide us with the closing remarks. Thank you.
Yes, still a few minutes to 12, so it's still good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nena Wabufu. I'm the bank's Vice President for Regional Development, Integration, and Service Delivery. Now, since I have the microphone, I will try to address the issue of the elephant. The fact still remains that despite this organization being an elephant, that Africa still needs much more money for development. So in comparison with the money that others have, they might be an elephant, but in comparison with the needs of Africa, they are not really that much of an elephant. So, but I think the important thing is that problem of the elephants comes up when countries don't take ownership of the country platform. So the development partners are the ones taking ownership. So there is one elephant who feels more important than the others. But at least I know one country where they take ownership of their country platform, and every elephant and ant is put together to agree on the priorities and the focus for each development partner. So I wasn't working in the country for 7.5 years, and I can tell you sometimes it's extremely frustrating to work with some governments because you never get any idea of what their priorities are. So yes, country platform can give you opportunity maybe to raise more financing, but the starting point of country platform, it gives the government the opportunity to decide where their priorities are and communicate it with the development partners and sort of agree with each development partner which area we can focus on. And where you have countries that don't set those kind of priorities, there is a lot of confusion. So you're working in a country, we are saying there isn't enough money, but you have a headroom of 500 million for them in a year. They don't even use half of it. Yet you're getting requests from every and anybody, but the country cannot determine its priorities. So if a country takes ownership, you determine your priorities, you communicate, development partners will take you seriously. And in defining your priorities, then you're able to assess whether your projects are ready or not. And then you can talk about support for getting funding to prepare the projects. And the more serious you are, the more the financiers are able to work with you and step up their engagement. So we don't need to be afraid of this elephant. We need a lot of money in Africa. We don't have as much as we need. So nobody should be seen as a monopoly. All hands on deck. But governments need to be in the driving seat to work with all development partners. Distinguished panelists, colleagues, participants, as we conclude this timely and insightful discussion, I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to our esteemed panelists for their invaluable contributions, and also to the South African G20 presidency for their leadership and partnership in co-hosting this important event. Earlier this week, during the AfDB G20 side event on the G20 Africa Expert Panel, engagement with stakeholders, we gained a deeper understanding of the critical role that the South African G20 presidency is playing in providing strategic guidance and elevating Africa's voice within the G20. Its goal is clear: to help define common African priorities and influence global policy frameworks that are more equitable and responsive to our continent's realities. Today's dialogue reaffirmed a powerful message. Country platforms, when country-led, well-coordinated, and strategically aligned, are among the most effective tools for unlocking transformative development finance. They are particularly vital in mobilizing private capital at scale. We have heard from African leaders, international partners about successful models, what needs to be scaled, and the future direction we must take. The examples shared have demonstrated that with the right enabling environment, effective use of blended finance, and strong institutional coordination, we can crowd in private investment and not merely aspire for it. At the African Development Bank, we remain fully committed to supporting country-led platforms that are aligned with national priorities. We are also focused on enhancing coordination across multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and the private sector. Drawing from today's rich discussions, we will deepen our work across key initiatives, including the Horn of Africa, the Sahel engagements, and agriculture and energy compacts. We will continue to work closely with our regional member countries, providing both technical assistance and financing through a range of bank instruments, including sovereign operations, private sector investments, policy-based financing, and institutional capacity building. These efforts are part of our broader commitment to aligning our operations with Africa's development agenda. Allow me to emphasize a critical point that resonated throughout this discussion. This is not only about improving financing mechanisms, it is about determining our priorities, rebalancing the global development finance architecture to ensure African countries have a greater voice, leadership, and ownership in shaping their development path. As we move forward, I urge all stakeholders, governments, public development banks, multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and private sector actors to remain steadfast in building partnerships that are rooted in local priorities, mutual trust, and a shared focus on delivery. Together, we can make country platforms not only a valuable tool, but a true game changer in Africa's development journey. Finally, I would like to express our gratitude once again to the South African G20 presidency and the National Treasury of South Africa for their unwavering support. Among the key lessons emerging from our engagement today are the critical importance of country ownership, alignment with the Paris Agenda, enhanced collaboration amongst development partners, and the need for innovative financial instruments such as risk-sharing tools, blended finance, and credit guarantees. Looking ahead, the African Development Bank is committed to using the insights gathered here to support countries in designing and scaling up integrated country platforms. We will provide technical assistance, innovative financing, supported by strong delivery units that can bring development programs to fruition. We also look forward to using the outcomes of this event to complement and reinforce the work of the South African G20 presidency. I thank you very much for your presence and your attention.